What would happen if, every time you walked into your workplace, you carried the weight of fear instead of the drive to do your best? That is the reality for many people who face sexual harassment at work. It isn't always loud, obvious, or violent. Sometimes it's the subtle remark, the unwanted comment, the joke that feels like a cut you can't quite heal from. And here's the important part. When it goes unchecked, it becomes part of the culture. Think about this. Culture is not built by mission statements on the wall, but by what people allow to happen in the room. If we stay silent when someone crosses the line, the silence itself becomes permission. And once that culture takes root, it doesn't just hurt one person, it spreads like a toxin, draining energy, lowering morale, and replacing motivation with anxiety. You can find countless stories in books and research studies showing that toxic workplaces cost far more than just lost productivity. They steal people's potential. They make people hide their voices. They convince talented individuals that maybe they don't belong. And when that happens, the whole organization pays the price. The power imbalance is often what makes harassment possible. One person feels they can push boundaries because the other person won't speak up, can't afford to, or fears retaliation. But here's something worth remembering. Respect is never built on intimidation. Real leadership, real authority comes from creating safety, not fear. So what do? First, we stop treating harassment as a minor issue. It is not minor. The smallest act can set the tone for the biggest consequences. Second, we build courage, because courage is contagious. When one person speaks up, it gives others permission to find their own voice. Third, we commit to accountability. Without it, promises are just words. Ask yourself this question. If you were the one being targeted, would silence from your coworkers feel like support or betrayal? That question alone tells us how deeply silence matters. Every time we witness harassment and do nothing, we make it easier for it to continue. Every time we speak up, even in small ways, we shift the culture toward respect. Creating a safe workplace isn't about policies in a manual. It's about daily actions, choosing respect over ridicule, listening instead of dismissing, and making it clear that every person's dignity matters. When people feel safe, they don't just survive at work, they thrive, they innovate, they contribute, they grow. The question isn't whether harassment exists, it does. The real question is, will we let it define the environment we spend most of our waking hours in, or will we take responsibility to change it? The choice belongs to each of us, because silence protects the harasser, but courage protects the future. Would you like me to also give you a shorter 3-minute version of this speech for quick delivery alongside this full-length motivational style? The silent damage caused by ignoring harassment at work is far greater than most people realize. When someone experiences harassment, it doesn't just happen in the moment and then disappear. It lingers. It stays with them when they're trying to concentrate on a project, when they walk into a meeting, when they check their emails. It quietly drains their energy and their confidence, piece by piece. Over time, that constant weight of discomfort builds into something heavier: stress, anxiety, even burnout. And what makes it worse is when the behavior is brushed off, minimized, or ignored. Imagine what that does to a person's sense of value. They begin to question themselves. Am I overreacting? Should I just stay quiet? That self-doubt is often more destructive than the original act, because it convinces people to shrink rather than stand tall. In that silence, creativity suffers. Motivation fades. Work no longer feels like a place of growth, but a place of survival. And here's the truth. Ignoring harassment doesn't just harm the individual who experiences it. It sends a message to everyone else in the workplace that this kind of behavior is tolerated. It tells people that if they ever speak up, they might not be heard. Slowly, the environment becomes unsafe, not just for one person, but for the entire team. And when people don't feel safe, they cannot give their best. They protect themselves instead of sharing ideas. They hide instead of contributing. This is why ignoring harassment is never neutral. It is never harmless. Silence is not just the absence of action, it is a form of action in itself, because it allows harm to continue. And every day it continues. It chips away at trust, at dignity, and at the very reason people come to work: to grow, to contribute, and to make a difference. Why do small comments and so-called jokes matter so much? Because words carry weight, even when they're wrapped in laughter. A single remark that crosses a line might seem harmless to the person who says it, but to the one on the receiving end, it can echo long after the moment has passed. What's often brushed off as just a joke can actually become a daily reminder that they are not seen as an equal, not respected as a professional, and not valued for who they are. Think about how repetition works. One joke, one offhand comment, one inappropriate remark might sting, but when it happens again and again, it builds a pattern. That pattern creates an environment where disrespect feels normal, where people start to expect to be belittled, and where their guard is always up. Instead of focusing on the work they came to do, they're forced to navigate an undercurrent of humiliation. And here's something to really consider. Humor is powerful. It can bring people together, or it can quietly cut someone down. When used irresponsibly, it becomes a weapon that hides behind a smile. The damage may not show on the outside, but inside, it leaves scars. Scars on confidence, on self-esteem, and on the ability to trust coworkers. The truth is, there are no harmless jokes when they come at the expense of someone's dignity. Every joke either builds respect or chips away at it. Every comment either strengthens trust or erodes it. And over time, those little things, those words that seem small, can create a culture that feels big, heavy, and impossible to thrive in. How is workplace culture really formed? Not by the values written in the employee handbook or the inspirational posters hanging on the walls. Culture is shaped by what people consistently allow, ignore, or encourage. Every moment, every interaction, every response to behavior, these are the bricks that build the environment we work in. When harassment happens and people look away, that silence becomes part of the culture. It teaches everyone watching that the line can be crossed without consequence. Over time, those small allowances grow into something much larger. A workplace where disrespect is tolerated, where people feel unsafe, and where fear quietly replaces trust. On the other hand, when people choose to step in, whether by addressing the behavior, supporting the person affected, or holding someone accountable, they send a completely different message. They set a new standard. They say, this is not who we are, and this is not how we treat each other here. That act, even if it feels small, reshapes the culture. What makes culture so powerful is that it doesn't just affect individuals, it affects everyone. A culture of respect encourages people to share their ideas, to bring their full selves to work, and to feel proud of what they contribute. A culture of fear does the opposite. It silences voices, suppresses creativity, and makes every day feel like a struggle to simply endure. So the real question isn't what's written in the policies. The question is, what do we actually do day by day? Because culture is built by actions, not statements. And in the case of harassment, the culture we create determines whether people shrink back or stand tall, whether they suffer in silence or thrive in safety. The hidden cost to mental health and productivity is something that often gets overlooked when we talk about harassment at work. Many people assume the damage stays in that single moment, but the truth is, it follows a person far beyond it. When someone experiences harassment, they don't just shake it off and move on. They carry it with them, into their projects, into their meetings, into their interactions with colleagues. Stress begins to build, and with it comes exhaustion, sleepless nights, and constant worry. Anxiety takes root, making even ordinary tasks feel overwhelming. And then there's the quiet erosion of confidence. People begin second-guessing themselves, questioning their worth, and holding back their ideas. That mental weight doesn't just affect the individual, it ripples outward. The team feels it, the work suffers, and the overall energy of the workplace begins to sink. From a productivity standpoint, harassment is one of the most expensive problems a workplace can ignore. When people don't feel safe, they spend their energy protecting themselves instead of focusing on their best work. Creativity dries up. Collaboration weakens. Deadlines get missed, not because people lack skill, but because they're too drained to function at their full potential. What could have been a thriving, innovative environment turns into one of survival and silence. And here's the most damaging part. These hidden costs don't show up on a balance sheet right away. They hide in turnover rates, in disengagement, in the quiet resignation of employees who mentally check out long before they physically leave. By the time an organization realizes the loss, the damage has already compounded. This is why harassment cannot be dismissed as a personal issue or something outside of work. It is directly tied to the health of the workplace itself. If mental health suffers, productivity suffers. If productivity suffers, the entire organization pays the price. Protecting dignity isn't just the right thing to do morally, it is the only way to create a workplace that actually thrives. Power imbalances are at the very heart of why harassment thrives in so many workplaces. When one person holds authority, whether through a title, influence, or even social standing, they may feel they have the freedom to cross lines without consequence. The imbalance creates an environment where one voice feels louder, stronger, and more protected, while the other feels smaller, vulnerable, and silenced. For the person on the receiving end, this imbalance can make it almost impossible to speak up. They might fear losing their job, damaging their reputation, or being labeled as difficult. They might worry that no one will believe them, especially if the harasser has influence over promotions, opportunities, or even the opinions of others. This fear traps people in silence, and silence is the very fuel that harassment feeds on. But let's think about something important. True leadership does not come from control, intimidation, or taking advantage of power. Real authority is measured by how safe people feel in your presence, not how fearful they are. A manager who makes people afraid might achieve compliance, but never loyalty. Respect built on intimidation is fragile, but respect built on fairness and dignity lasts. History and literature remind us again and again that unchecked power often leads to abuse. But they also remind us that the strength of any community, whether it's a nation, a family, or a workplace, depends on how the powerful treat the vulnerable. When the strong protect the weak, trust grows. When the strong exploit the weak, trust dies. This is why addressing power imbalances is so crucial. A workplace must make it clear that no position, no title, no amount of influence gives someone the right to cross boundaries. Accountability must be stronger than authority. Otherwise, power will continue to be misused and harassment will continue to hide in its shadow. Respect and intimidation may look similar from the outside, but they could not be more different. When someone is respected, people listen to them willingly. When someone intimidates, people comply out of fear. On the surface, both may seem effective. Tasks get done, rules are followed, but underneath the outcomes are completely opposite. Respect builds connection, while intimidation builds distance. Respect fosters trust, while intimidation breeds resentment. Think about the feeling of being respected. It gives you confidence, makes you feel valued, and allows you to contribute openly without fear of judgment. Now compare that with the feeling of being intimidated. It shrinks you. It makes you cautious, careful with every word, worried about making a mistake. In that environment, you're not bringing your best ideas forward. You're just trying to survive without drawing negative attention. Some leaders confuse the two. They believe that being feared means being respected, but fear does not equal respect. It equals silence. And silence is dangerous because it hides problems instead of solving them. It forces people to nod in agreement while secretly holding back the truth. It creates the illusion of order, but destroys genuine progress. Respect, on the other hand, creates openness. When people feel respected, they're more likely to share ideas, take initiative, and support one another. They don't have to waste energy protecting themselves because they know their dignity is safe. And in that kind of environment, both individuals and organizations flourish. The real test is simple. If people only listen when you're present, that's intimidation. If they carry your values and actions forward even when you're not in the room, that's respect. Intimidation controls people temporarily, but respect empowers them permanently. And when it comes to preventing harassment, respect is the only foundation strong enough to sustain a safe and healthy workplace. Courage is the turning point in any story of change. Without it, harassment continues unchecked. With it, even the smallest voice can spark a shift in the entire workplace. Speaking up is rarely easy. It often feels risky, uncomfortable, and uncertain. But it is precisely in those moments of discomfort that real progress begins. When someone finds the courage to step forward, whether as a victim or as a witness, they break the cycle of silence. And here's the powerful part. Courage spreads. One person's act of bravery can inspire another to do the same. Soon what felt impossible becomes possible because people no longer feel alone. Courage doesn't always look like grand gestures. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, "That's not appropriate." Sometimes it's pulling someone aside privately to offer support. Sometimes it's reporting behavior that everyone else has ignored. Every act, no matter how small, carries weight. Each one says, "I see this and I will not pretend it's okay." Of course, courage often comes with fear. Fear of retaliation, fear of judgment, fear of losing opportunities. But history and human experience show us something important. Growth has never happened without risk. And when it comes to harassment, the cost of staying silent is always greater than the cost of speaking up. Silence protects the wrong person. Courage protects the right one. What makes courage truly powerful is that it doesn't just protect individuals, it reshapes culture. It tells everyone watching that dignity matters here, that respect is non-negotiable, and that people will not be left to suffer alone. And once courage takes root, the environment begins to shift from fear to safety, from silence to truth. Silence is often mistaken for neutrality, but in the context of harassment, silence is never neutral. It is a choice, and that choice has consequences. When people witness harassment and say nothing, it sends an unspoken message. This behavior is acceptable, this person can get away with it, and the target is on their own. In that moment, silence becomes a shield for the harasser and a wound for the victim. Think about how it feels to be on the receiving end. Not only do you have to endure the inappropriate comment or action, but then you look around and see no one speaking up for you. That absence of support can hurt just as much as the harassment itself. It reinforces the idea that your dignity is not worth protecting, that your pain is invisible, and that your voice will never be heard. And here's where silence becomes complicity. By doing nothing, we actually strengthen the very culture we claim to oppose. Harassers thrive in silence. They rely on it. It gives them confidence that they can continue without consequence. But when silence is broken, even with a simple, firm response, the entire balance shifts. Suddenly, the harasser is no longer in control because the behavior is no longer hidden. It's easy to tell ourselves, "It's not my business," or "someone else will say something." But every time we stay quiet, we become part of the problem, even if we never intended to be. Complicity doesn't require action, it only requires indifference. The reality is that speaking up can feel uncomfortable, but the discomfort of silence is far greater in the long run. A culture of silence erodes trust, while a culture of accountability builds it. And the moment we recognize that silence fuels harassment, we also recognize that our voices have the power to stop it. Accountability is the backbone of trust in any workplace. Without it, promises are empty, policies are meaningless, and respect is just a word with no weight behind it. When people see that harassment is addressed with real consequences, they begin to believe that their voices matter. They feel safer, stronger, and more willing to contribute. But when harassment is ignored or brushed aside, trust collapses. And once trust is broken, it is incredibly hard to rebuild. Accountability means more than having rules written in a handbook. It means those rules are lived out in action, applied fairly no matter who is involved. A senior leader, a manager, or an employee at any level, no one should be above the standard of respect. If accountability is selective, people will see it as favoritism, and favoritism destroys credibility faster than almost anything else. Think about the power of consistency. When people know that bad behavior will be addressed every single time, it creates confidence. It says, "This workplace is serious about dignity." On the other hand, when people see harassment swept under the rug, it tells them, "We talk about values, but we don't live them." That gap between words and actions is where trust dies. What's important to remember is that accountability is not just about punishment, it's about protection. Protecting the dignity of every individual, protecting the integrity of the culture, protecting the mission of the organization itself. When accountability is present, people feel valued. When it's absent, people feel disposable. Trust doesn't grow because someone says the right thing. It grows because people do the right thing consistently. Accountability is the bridge between values and reality. Without it, harassment will always find a way to survive. With it, respect becomes more than an idea. It becomes the lived experience of every person in the workplace. Every person in the workplace carries a personal responsibility to create a safe space. It's not just the job of managers, HR, or policies. It belongs to all of us. Culture is not built from the top down alone. It is built moment by moment through the choices each individual makes. When you decide to treat someone with respect, when you choose to step in rather than look away, when you commit to upholding dignity even in small interactions, you are shaping the environment in a powerful way.